I made a big offer to AJ, a bigger offer than they did, actually. I personally think they copped out.
They gave him a defence.
Well,
they were a witness for the defence.
Well, and he said he'd call me back and we'd get together, and he never ever called me back.
Frank, I don't know if you know or heard, we had Eddie Hearn in the studio last week. I think he's still doing a victory lap, apparently, about winning something or another. I thought we had a conversation. I don't know what he was going to win. Eddie, you've got too much free time, mate. I'll ask you what you thought of it in a minute if you heard it. But what's your relationship like with Eddie Hearn?
I haven't got one. I've never.
What does that mean?
Means I think I may have met him very briefly, like a hello, and that's it. I've never had a I had one conversation with him on a phone where we were trying to make a fight, and he said he'd call me back and we'd get together, and he never ever called me back.
But you guys, you must have an opinion on him. I mean, he flaps his gums about you a lot, and you have things to say about him, and George has had things to say as well. So you've got to take. I mean, you're not backward about coming forward. You must have a viewpoint.
What do I think of him? I think he's, you know, look, I know Barry very well. Barry and I were partners at one stage, many in the 80s, in the snooker business for a short space of time. He's a very, very good promoter of Eddie Hearn. That's what he is, and he's done it very well, and people have bought into it, and he makes himself at times, I think, more important than he thinks he's more important than the fights are, and more important than boxing is. You know, I mean, I've seen over the years lots of people come into boxing. They're going to change it. The poor fighters are all being screwed. I'm going to be the saviour of boxing. I mean, it's the same old story. I've heard it a million times. And time tells with everything. You know, I've noticed in the last few months he's lost a few fighters because that happens in boxing. Fighters that go elsewhere.
Change of platforms is inevitable.
It's the same old thing and whatever, and that's happened with him. And I've seen a couple of fighters have had some unflattering things to say about him, and I've been in that position as well.
And a few had unflattering things to say about you.
Yes,
as well.
what I just said. I said I've had that over the years with fighters, so it's nothing unusual. But you know, you look at the Sky situation. You know, 1 minute they were just a marketing machine for Matchroom. Now they're not, and they had a turnaround, and that's what this business is. You know, 1 minute you're all pals, and the next minute you're not. He's done extremely well. He was in the right place at the right time with Anthony-Joshua when he won the gold medal at the Olympics.
But you'd have all wanted to be in that place, though, wouldn't you?
I mean, I made a big offer to AJ, a bigger offer than they did, actually. We offered them at the time. But the Sky thing got it over the line. I think it was at the time he had an agent working for him for a short space of time who's I think he looks after Jensen Button as well, and Button was at Formula One with Sky, and and they got that over the line. And that, and with the greatest respect, you know, it wasn't very difficult to promote AJ winning the Olympic gold medal. And Tyson had his problems, and he vacated all the belts, and he wound up fighting.
So you don't think very much of him as a bottom line?
No, I don't. No, I'm just going to a bit of history. He got Charles Martin, and which I thought was probably one of the worst heavyweight champs ever. And it went on from there. And between Sky, AJ, and him, they done a fabulous marketing job of AJ.
But he does make big fights, doesn't he?
He made the big fights with him because he had the heavyweight champion, and he managed to get that over the line. And cut a long story short, he's done well for himself. And I think the big thing for him, as far as finance is concerned, they've made a fortune, Matchroom, out of being involved with the Zone.
Yep.
So Len Blavinic is, he's poured a lot of money into boxing, and you only got to look at their accounts. Their accounts they've lost billions. Where they are, and Matchroom have done well out of boxing.
When you were listening to the conversation, I mean, I didn't much like the Punch and Judy billing of it all, knockabout conversation. I don't think I'm in a particular conversation with Eddie Hearn, and I certainly don't think I know more than him. And if I did, there'd be something wrong, wouldn't they? I've been here for 5 minutes, he's been here for 20 years. So I think it's a ridiculous premise. But when you were listening to the conversation, what did you take away from it? What did you think about it? And I'm going to ask you specifically in a minute points that I took away from it. But what did you hear? Because there's a lot of controversy specifically around Conor Benn. And that's my main issue with Eddie Hearn, his conduct in Conor Benn. What did you take away from it?
What I took away from it is that you're not a fool. You do a lot of research. You've been involved in sport in a big way. You put your money up like I've done in sport. You put your money up, and you know what you know what it's about. I'm not about the intricacies of boxing, but you certainly know what's. You've got to be a fool not to know what's right and what's wrong. And talking about the Conor Benn situation, it was wrong. Everything about it was wrong, and there's no way it could be justified.
Is it a standard form in a contract between a promoter and a fighter that there's a clause in there? Because I asked Cully Sowland this afternoon on a different show, and he said it's pretty much. I've asked other people that are promoters. I'm asking you now: is it standard form in a contract to give a promoter an opportunity to stop representing a fighter if there is a failed drugs test by a recognised environment, whether it's WADA or VADA or UCAD? Is that, because I made the allegation to Eddie, which he refuted and disputed, that he could have pulled himself out of this fight as a promoter under a standard form clause that would be good order to have in most promoters' contracts.
Right. Most promoters would have that in their contracts. Yeah. We certainly do. If a fight is a mandatory defence of a title, then you'd go to a standard form contract. Right. But the promoter would have his own separate promotional deal with his fighter, the boxer, which would cover...
Which would enable him to stop promoting it. He couldn't pull the fight, but he could pull his promotion. Yeah, and if he pulled his promotion, it would stop the fight, wouldn't it?
Yeah, right. Absolutely. Right. So I would say that I'd be very surprised if there weren't a clause in a contract covering that.
What did you make, then, of the observation that Eddie Hearn plans to put on Conor Benn versus Chris Eubank Jr.? What was your view on that?
What, now?
Yeah.
Or before?
Well, no. That circle's been squared, right?
Talk about now.
I'm talking about now. He's now announced to the world on the show last week that his intention is to make Eubank versus Benn most likely in the Middle East. What do you reckon on that?
I think that Conor needs to clear himself up completely get all the ambiguity and everything out of the way as far as where he got to with his two failed tests. Because let's get it right. At the end of the day, what the outcome of the WBC, I don't think satisfied.
How do you think they've handled themselves?
I personally think they copped out.
They gave him a defence. Well, they were a witness for the defence.
Well, exactly. What they did, which was the most important thing. I think they took away any ambiguity that the laboratories that tested both the samples, the two failed things, that there was anything wrong with it. It was done. They cleared that. They said those. Yeah, they removed
the process of the allegation that the laboratory could be failing.
So that kills that. To come out with it was because of
a potential dietary issue.
Tainted dietary issue, which they said were eggs, and in this country, we all, as everybody's well aware of now, those that is not that PED is not allowed
in eggs in this country.
Production of poultry or eggs. So he's given up his board license. He's done an interview with peers. He's done. Eddie Hearn came on and did one with you. I don't think they've cleared anything up. I think
they haven't. Because the only way they can clear something up is to go through strict liability and go to the British Boxing Board of Control and to go through their process. Yeah. Right? So going back to the original question of what do you think?
Fight shouldn't go on.
Shouldn't go on. No. Right. So under no circumstances you would put a fighter of yours, because Chris Eubank Jr. has got a problem, hasn't he? He's got a problem insofar as in order for him to fight abroad, he needs the British Boxing Board of Control's permission, right? Yeah. And if he doesn't get the British Boxing Board of Control's permission, unless he vacates his license, which means he can't fight on these shores.
Correct.
So all of a sudden he's lost that opportunity. So if you were promoting Chris Eubank, you would never advocate for him to put in a position where he's fighting a fighter of potential bad standing, because Conor Benn is in bad standing with the British Boxing Board of Control.
Look, first of all, for me, it was a problem to start with the fight because of the weight disparity.
Yeah, it was always a...
So that's not changed. Yeah. That's still a problem before you even start. For me, it's wrong. It's wrong until he clears himself, and he should clear himself. And if he hasn't, there's a year gone by nearly now. So
I'm going to ask you a question about how the board's operated first, but bringing up the idea of fighters with failed drugs tests, I want you to talk to me about a fighter that you're associated with, which is Zolani Tete.
Yeah.
and his test.
Yep.
Because people have gone, hang on a second, Frank, hold on to you, just a second, pointing your finger at Eddie Hearn and his relationships with fighters that have failed drugs tests. You've got a problem with the boy Tete. What say you to that?
I'd say that he has to have his hearing, and they've determined that it takes place in South Africa, which is what they've said. Will
you promote him again in the meantime?
No, not until if he fails his test, and he can't prove that he was clean, and he's not submitted his B test, then I will not promote him.
Right.
End of story.
So the two scenarios are not anywhere comparable.
I've not come out in any way and said who he's fighting.
But just so people that don't know, what is the situation? What's manifested itself with Tete?
Well, we've sort of been a bit out of the loop. We are his promoter, but we've been out of the loop a bit, and we've not really heard.
Isn't it similar to Dillian White's situation where there was a failed drugs test on the week leading up to the fight? Isn't it similar to that?
Well, Dillian White, it was brought to the attention.
Jason Cunningham didn't know, did he?
No, it was brought to attention before the fight of the failed test. We were unaware there was a failed test before that fight.
Why would you be unaware?
Because
you're in the loop, weren't you?
Well, no, because nobody told us to. We were made aware that he failed a drugs test after the fight.
With who? Who failed in the drugs test? UCAD. But aren't you on the list of information that would provide you with that?
Yeah, but we were told after the fight. And the reason he was told after is it may have come from.
Doesn't this bring the whole thing into?
No, it doesn't, because you've got to understand. No, let me finish.
Go on, then.
You've got to understand the process. You have regular drug tests, so you could fail one of them, or you might pass all those, and then you have a drugs test after the fight. So if you pee in the bottle after the fight, you may fail that, and that's
so.
After
Which one did
the
he
fight.
fail?
What I understand, it's the one after. That's what I'm told.
Right.
So that's where we're at.
Okay. All right. A lot of people suggest that there's an element of
needing
to explain yourself on that one.
Well, if he was fouled before, no one brought it to our attention before the fight.
But again, I asked you the question because you'd be on the list, though, wouldn't you? If he's been fouled by UCAD, as the promoter, you'd be on the list.
We were not. I can categorically tell you, we were never, ever made aware before any fight, because had we been made aware, I'd have pulled the fight. It wasn't even the main event.
The board. And I know it's difficult because politically you want to be on the right side of the governing body. But when you look at the conduct of the board over this whole instance, and other instances as well, but let's just confine it to this particular instance, what do you make of it? Why did it take so long? I make the argument that they were given a cease and desist by Conor Benn's lawyers. I make the argument they should have had more balls about them and pushed back on them and told them to go do one. I make a raft of arguments, but it's easy for me to make, right? You know how these things operate. You know the personalities. You know the configuration of the board. You've been around it longer than all of us put together, right? So what do you make of their not dealing with it quickly or expeditiously, and their whole handling of it full stop? Because to me, it looks like they were compromised, but notwithstanding it, they should have been stronger. But more importantly, what do you think?
I think, first of all, that the first test came from the WBC, who obviously notified the board, notified all parties. And I think that I know, and you know, that they were getting letters from lawyers and so forth telling why. I don't think under any circumstance they should have bowed to those letters. What is the point of it? What is the point of a board if you can just run roughshod over PEDs, which are a dangerous element to any sport, and certainly boxing? What is the point of it? If you're gonna capitulate, then that's not good enough.
They're not fit for purpose, then, are they?
Well, let me finish. So they obviously have that worry. So what do you do about it? The first thing you do, I think, you stand up to it. If you can't stand up to it, and I don't see why you shouldn't, but then you should be changing your regulations. Yep. You should be amending those regs, getting some teeth to stop what's going on. And it's going on not just in this sport, it's going on in a lot of sports at the moment. But you should amend your regulations. UCAD are as bad. There are times where they've rolled over in the past, which is not acceptable. These drugs are either acceptable or not, and people try and confuse the issue.
Are you talking about Dillian White versus Oscar Rivas, where they gave him an emergency hearing and let him fight?
Eventually, but what I thought was really bad about it is they didn't tell the opponent somebody had failed a test. Because if I've got a boxer, and I wrote to the board after this, I said, I need to know if one of my fighters are fighting, that he's fighting a guy who's clean and there's nothing in the background that he's failed a test. Because I have a duty of care to the boxer as a manager, and you have a duty of care as a governing body to let him be aware.
So I say to you, does this mean the British Boxing Board of Control are not fit for purpose? You say, hang on a second, let me explain. Is that an unfair allegation on my part?
No, I think they are fit for purpose. I think they've been under I think they need to move into the 21st century, and I think that they frequently get bullied by lawyers because, as you may know, many years ago. Well, they got money. They do have money. It's not quite.
And they've also got professional liability insurance.
Yeah, of course. And they have it insurance. And I don't know how they deal with insurers if you're allowing a boxer to fight who's past a PED, and God forbid there's a fatality. How do you get around that one? So you're in a bigger problem then. But and they have had problems where boxers' medicals and they've been sued. Michael Watson, that was a real problem for him, and it cost them a lot of money, and they handled that badly. They should have accepted liability and dealt with it and paid his money, and they didn't. And I got involved and helped him, but it's another case in getting that over the line. But the fact of the matter is, you have to be strong as an organisation. The fact of the matter is, get your regulations, go and see the barrister, sort it out. So if anything happens like this, that you're licensing a boxer, these are the conditions we're licensing you under. You have to abide by any.
How rife and how problematic is doping in boxing, do you think? How big a deal is it?
I think it's become bigger over the years. I do, yeah. I do. I hate to say it.
So they've got to get more grown up, haven't they?
They have got to get more joined up, and people have to be accountable. And it's all very well saying, I passed the UCAD test, but I failed this one. It's irrelevant. It's on the days when you get caught. This stuff can be in your system and be out in 24 hours. All these masking drugs and everything they take, and it needs to be dealt with. And they got to get some. Do you think boxing is? I mean, I'm looking at it. I'm likely to get involved in one capacity or another, and not just talk about other people's business. Actually, do some of my own. Yeah. Right? Do you think? I mean, I get regular commentaries. I talk to other people in certain sections of the media. Going, this boxing game, they say, it's dirty, murky, horrible, ugly, corrupt business with no upside. It sounds like football. But do you think it's as dark and as sinister and as corrupt and as full of unsavoury characters as people suggest it is? Is it better? Because I mean, you had your battles in the 70s with Lawless and Duff and Astaire and all that crew, right? And broke the cartel, right? So looking at it now, do you think it is what I've just said it is? Is it better? What's your take on it? I don't think so much. Look, I've got to be honest. I think you can point a finger at any sport
and say there's a problem.
And say the same thing. Yeah. You can say it about football. You can say there are unsavoury people who run clubs in football. You can say that about cricket. You can say the crooked syndicates in horse racing, betting scandals. Footballers going to prison for throwing matches. There's loads of different things. Cricket. We've had it ice skating. One ice skater breaking her opponent's legs to win a.
Is it better than it was?
Is it better than it was? I think.
I mean, we had convicted murderers running around like racketeers like Don King once upon a time.
Well, I think it's easier now to. I think they're more interested in the finance side rather than the actual regulating it and keeping people out who shouldn't be in the sport. I think there's more. I don't think they're strong as they should be on that. I generally think now that I just feel that the promoters, managers and trainers should have a moral responsibility when a fighter's being given PEDs, that you are the person, you the people, you know what's going on, then you should be as culpable.
You should be in the cart as well.
Yeah, you should be in it, because I don't believe any boxer takes. I don't believe
you're saying shared responsibility. So any fighter that fails a test is trained, and everyone else fails.
I don't believe a boxer who takes PEDs
is doing it alone.
Because somebody has to get it from something. And I think if they get found guilty, you want to get back into boxing. You're going to ban them a long time. You want to get back. You want your license back. Then you have to tell us where you got that from.
Yeah,
who gave them to you.
I had a debate with Eddie about a rule change insofar as any accredited laboratory that throws out an adverse finding brings it into the jurisdiction of the British Boxing Board of Control and UCAD. He said, that rule doesn't exist. And he referred to Demetrius Andrade and Billy Joe Saunders. I said, it does exist. Now, subsequently, we found out that it does exist, right? But it was only changed in September 22. Here's my question for you, because Eddie asked me, what would you do in a situation? I said, I'd operate in best in class. He said, that's the benefit of hindsight. I said, well, the best in class don't need the benefit of hindsight, do they? Because they're the best in class. There was a memo that went out in February of this year suggesting that this rule change was coming down the pike and that ultimately it would be ratified at the next board meeting because they hadn't been able to have board meetings for the last 2 years because of COVID.
Yeah.
Did you get that memo advising you that this particular rule change was going to come?
I'm quite sure we did. I can't say definitely because they would be sent, but that would be given to a fellow in my office who administrates all that. But of course, we're all aware of it because that's I've had conversations.
So you provide for it in your contract, which basically says if a fighter fails a test and it's a VADA test, I want to be out of this contract potentially because he's breached a drugs test and it's going to come down the pike anyway.
Correct.
Okay. Frank, the grilling is over.
Thank you.
Right, that's it for episode 18 of Talk Boxing with Simon Jordan. And this week, the brilliant Frank Warren. Don't forget, keep liking, subscribing, keep watching the videos. And I will see you back with the little fella when he's back from Fantasy Island.